Hello and welcome to another episode of From a Certain Point Askew. My name is Matt, and again, I'm providing a quick intro for this week's episode because it's something we recorded back in July. This is the conclusion of our discussion about the Disney Gallery The Mandalorian series, so we're covering episodes 5 through 8. That includes practical, process, score, and connections. Apologies if we get a little repetitive from our first episode. We had a bit of a break between the two recordings, so you might pick up on that. Remember that you can find the show at FromACertainPointAskew.com. You can find us on Twitter at FACPAPod, and you can email the show, and we'll address your questions on air at FACPAPod@gmail.com. We are still waiting for the Season 2 trailer to drop, but once it does, we'll have a fresh episode out breaking that down. In the meantime, we'll get into the episode recaps of Season 1 starting next week. For now, enjoy the second part of our discussion of the making of The Mandalorian.
I guess we just dive deep in this, you guys. Give me your thoughts, your love. Let's go into practical.
Let's get practical.
You could call that the baby episode, I suppose.
It really was, yeah.
I thought it was funny how they just constantly call him the baby. But this was a big one for me, and I know we talked about it a little bit on the previous episode, but the practical effects are such a huge part of Star Wars. And, you look back on, even when you look back on Yoda, if you look at it at face value, it can seem kind of hokey. Mm-hmm. But, that's what drives so much of the emotion, and I think what also drives those actors, and they talk about that, is the fact that you're actually playing off of something that's there and moving and sort of looks real. So
right.
It makes a big difference for these actors to be able to actually kind of somehow, quote, relate to it. And then as an audience goer, as a watcher of the show, you have more of an emotional connection because of that. And that's one of the things I always harp on with CGI is you can tell a lot of times it's just it's a fucking hologram sitting there. So how are you supposed to be emotionally tied to it? If E.T. was a hologram, would we have had as much emotional connection to E.T.? No. And so that's why I just think it's so important. I love the way that they're treating this by going so practical with the actual characters themselves. Of course, you can't shoot out in outer space, but with the characters themselves, I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah, and then when you have an actual tangible piece of the set, you've got that Baby Yoda, and they talked about it took 3 months to build that little tiny ass puppet, mm-hmm. and all the work.
So there's 7 people.
There's a team. There's an entire team. That one little puppet.
I'm in charge of the eyes.
Yeah, I do the hand motions, and these guys are it's amazing. But having that tangible, actual thing to interact with,
and they all treated it like it was an actor.
Right, they treated it like it was a little person, and
even Werner Herzog, he got upset, and he's like, "Don't you be?" I don't know what his exact phrasing was, but basically, you guys are a bunch of pussies because they wanted to do the plate shot, which is basically that's the shot where then they can insert the CGI for it, and then match them up. And he's like, "Just use the fucking puppet." And they even talk about this. So he ended up being right. 9 times out of 10, we just used the puppet for everything that we could, and then they had to get the CGI to sort of match the puppet. And I really like the fact that because they can make things look so much better, right? But they still give it that 1977, early 80s, the original trilogy vibe. Everything sort of has to match how it kind of worked then, where they talk
Stop
about
motion, right?
the AT-ATs, the AT-ATs, the everything had or IG-11, they kind of made it wonky, and everything still has it, but it makes it more realistic on film. They're right, they do it right by that.
Yeah, and it's difficult because they talked about they had to even just bring it back. They'd almost kind of dumb it down a little bit, make it look a little bit more hokey to match the 4, 5, and 6.
Mm-hmm.
How things looked when you were watching the attack run on the Death Star. You'd see the slow moving TIE fighter following an X-wing fighter, and it was just things like that. But they did that with the what are those beasts? The Belwas?
The Blogs?
The Blurgs. They made them move different. They made the AT-ATs move mechanically slow versus And then they talked about the difference between the chicken walker that you saw in Empire versus the AT-AT that was AT-AT or ATST?
ATST.
ATST is the big one, isn't it?
No, the AT-AT is the big one. The ATST is the basically it was the
Return of the Jedi.
Return of the Jedi, but the chicken walker was an Empire.
Right. So there's the chicken walker, the AT-AT, and the ATST.
Yes.
And I will take 30 lashings with your whip for confusing those three.
If anyone's looking for us to say things right, you come to the wrong podcast.
That's the introduction to a certain point askew because we don't know the hell we're talking about half the time.
Well, you talked about how they were treating the practical effects and the characters like real actors. That story that Deborah Chow talks about with Werner Herzog, saying how he was talking to the baby, and like it was a person, and actually talking about what they were going to do in the scene, and all these, this team of 6 or 7 people are probably standing around going like, wait, what? He's talking to this little creature.
This guy's lost his mind.
Well, by the way, Herzog was just on the Empire Film Podcast, and they talked a little bit about his involvement with The Mandalorian, and he said one of the things that drew him to it was the way they were filming it, the volume, and how they were able to make it so it felt like everybody's in the same space. It's not like we're filming against a backboard and that's going to be thrown in later. All that stuff's already there. Mm-hmm. So everybody, the camera, the actors, they're all together. He's like, and that's like more back to core filmmaking, and that's what he really was drawn to for this. But the other thing I liked about the Baby Yoda was the way they said that it had to convey emotion. It's like its eyes are not, they didn't say that his eyes are dead, but like the eyes don't convey as much. It was all in the ears.
Yes,
and they talk about how his ears would pop in different directions, like a dog.
Yeah.
You can tell like kind of the emotion of a dog by the way it tilts its head or does whatever. So I just thought that was fascinating stuff.
Well, Favreau, I mean, God, just watching this and listening to him talk, the genius.
He's a wizard.
He goes in with so much preparation, and he takes everything from the Jungle Book, the Lion King, and that Gnomes CGI. What was it? A game or something he was doing? And that's how he had the idea with Baby Yoda, was all ears and eyes, because you had to have the expression that way. And like it's interesting to listen to him talk and pull everything that he's ever learned and throw it into this.
Well, we just, and it's something you kind of take for granted when you watch this beautifully shot series. But you just take the Ugnaught character for example. It's the voice of Nick Nolte. It's an actor underneath,
Misty Ross,
and then it's a character and an animatronic face mask on the face. And it's like you've got to meld these 3 things together. That's just one character, 3 different people, 3 different moving parts. For that, you almost saw like they gave it the throwback to the old school. His lips would move weird or a little bit. His facial expressions, like the Ugnaught wasn't seamless. Like you could almost tell that was a mask. Do you know what I'm saying? Like they gave it that 80s Star Wars feel to it. Like they talked about that a lot in I want to say the last episode. They talked about all the little shout outs, the little what do they call them? Deep cuts, right?
Yeah, we'll get into that. There's a
lot of and that was the stuff that drew me in. I'm like, oh no shit, I didn't see it and I didn't recognize it. And you would never really put it together unless you're a super fan.
Right.
So there's a lot of cool little things like
that I
liked.
And the fact that his name's Quill, right? The Ugnaught. The fact that I don't know if it's just because you know what Nick Nolte looks like and you hear the voice, but man, that thing looks kind of like him.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like he could be related to him.
Yeah, that's true.
It looks like that kind of got you there too.
I mean, really, Nick Nolte on a good day, because if you've seen him on a bad day when he's arrested, that hair is everywhere.
That's funny because wasn't Nick Nolte cast to be Han Solo at one point in time?
I think he was one of the actors.
They wanted Han to be, and then Han went and did some work on George Lucas's house.
He was his carpenter. Harrison Ford was his carpenter, and he kept reading all the lines during all the help me out here. Brain fart.
The rehearsals?
Rehearsals. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
I can just see Harrison Ford with his shirt off. What's up, George? You want this foyer? Where do you want it? You want it counterclockwise, clockwise? By the way,
Harrison Ford is like George Lucas's personal Schneider from One Day at a Time, just walking around twirling his hammer.
He's just talking, throwing Star Wars lines out there, looking over his shoulder. Did you hear that, George? I'd be perfect for this part.
I can't imagine seeing Harrison Ford do that, given how much he was so like. You've heard that story he tells to Mark Hamill, where Mark Hamill's talking about like when they're in A New Hope, and they come out of the pit, the garbage chute, and he's like, "But wouldn't my like hair still be wet?" And he was like, "If it's that kind of movie, kid, we're all screwed." He just is real.
He's always been pretty gruff.
Speaking of Mark Hamill, he was the voice of the bartender droid.
Right. I like how they keep bringing him in to do things, and he's so good with this. Like he's not like like you wouldn't get Harrison. Although to be fair, Harrison Ford came back for Rise of Skywalker, but you wouldn't get Harrison Ford to come in and do a voice or anything. Like he'll come in and do his part as Han, and he's done. He doesn't play with the Star Wars universe like Hamill does.
The Taika Waititi was IG-88's voice too. I didn't know that originally either.
Oh, you didn't?
I didn't.
Oh, okay. There's a couple other things that I wanted to. I love like how they get into some of the minutia, like with the practical effects, where they talk about how they bring back the guy who originally was the designer, creator, did the mold of everything for Salacious Crumb. Like these people that worked on it way back, they all get to come back and play with these worlds.
Well, yeah, I think, and we'll get to it more so in that last episode because they really get into the deep cuts. But it's really cool the way that they're borrowing and grabbing so much of this kind of extra stuff that you didn't necessarily notice or only diehard fans would even have an idea about, and then bringing them more to the forefront, but also trying to make it its own thing, which is, I think, really important. And we'll also get to that in the music because that's really different.
They really came full circle on a lot of things, and like the episode where they come back to Tatooine and they go into the Cantina bar, and they said that they did a lot of work bringing that set back to life, I guess.
Right.
But they kept it. Like there's a dude in there like putting like lenses into like one of the hanging lights. He's like, well, they were red on the left side and then blue on the right. He's like, so you guys are getting that? And he looks at the camera. He's like, I hope you appreciate this. He's pissed off.
Yeah, nothing is overlooked. It's amazing.
He's like, I got a doctorate in films from my film school. Dude.
Right. I'm sitting here putting plastic lenses in these. Yeah. I like Tales from the AV Club, how they consider themselves this small little group, and that's where they like share all their stories, and they even bring in the guy with because they have to figure out how to do the weapons.
Yeah, they use vintage World War II modified weapons for the blasters.
And they can only do so much because of the rental back in the 70s. So they keep what they did back then, they still do now to make everything match, or they try to keep that same feeling. They don't go because they really could. They could like go. I'm really curious, like when they do some of the new Star Wars stuff, like that's supposed to take place like either years later or outside of the Skywalker stuff. If they do change it up and make things look vastly different because they can shoot a different style or you know what I mean? Like they don't have to have, it doesn't have to have that same feeling or that same look, like making the AT-ATs, like where they got the weird shake because it's like stop motion, or like they can take all of that out and everything could be a little bit more fluid. But will we at the same time as an audience buy that?
I mean, you want to see it to be, and you want to be familiar with it, right? You want to like that AT-AT walking. You want it to be in that fucking up and down motion, and it's almost like you're moving one leg at a time, and then the head kind of like is almost free floating, and it moves and finds its target and then shoots. I mean, it's you want it to be familiar, and you want that nostalgia feel to it.
It is funny, like because they've adapted it enough to where we still accept it, right? Because you watch something 40 years ago besides Star Wars, and you're not going to watch them do the same technology these days. You wouldn't buy it. You'd be like, come on, you can do better than that. Right. But for whatever reason, we still, it's like the tried and true. We go along with it.
But that's
but there's ways to use the current modern day advances and still kind of have a nod to the old. So it still has that look and feel. I mean, that was one of the things that drew me into the Mandalorian right away. In that first scene when he walks into that bar, was it just felt like Star Wars immediately. Yeah. And so it's important to capture that feeling.
And they did a really great job, like with Episode 7, The Force Awakens, when they brought that back. Like you go inside of those Death Star cruisers, and it's the same panels and the same same outfits for the New Order. You know what I mean? It doesn't look like it's something out of Minority Report where they're bringing screens in and doing all the stuff that they could do. They kept it really basic with buttons on a panel and like the yellow glowing white lights, and
everything looks like a 1940 computer panel in a power plant.
Yeah, sure. Exactly.
Large glowing lights, and that's fucking all old school. Like, you think they'd adapt their technology a little bit, building a new Death Star.
And real quick, while we're talking about the weapons thing, and I found this fucking hilarious. I don't know if you guys liked it or not, or laughed about it or not, but or caught the same vibe that I caught. Favreau was sitting there with George Lucas, and he's like just sitting there, and you could tell he's just fanboying.
Yes.
And he's got his leg up over the chair.
That's the last one.
And I know, I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead.
You're fine.
But he's kind of just sucking up to Lucas about the Boba Fett blaster rifle. He's like, hey, did you notice we had the blaster rifle? We brought that in from the Christmas special. And George Lucas is like, yeah, whatever. He's just like kind of dismisses him. And you kind of like see Favreau's face just kind of drop.
Filoni like sells him out at the table and tells the story. Yeah. He didn't write that. He didn't care.
He just like, you just see his like hopes and dreams like, oh, the guy that I worship most cares so little about me.
What can I do now to impress him?
Yeah. Well, as we talked about before, having Filoni around, that guy's an encyclopedia, man.
Good
so
Lord,
he just knows everything. So when he thinks of all those ideas, Favreau, he's like, is there something we can borrow from the past to bring it to the forefront? He's like, oh, well, this was this. And this, he can point all that stuff out. Yeah. So just what a value to have that.
Yeah, you couldn't have the Star Wars today without Filoni.
And you know,
I don't think so.
You know, Lucas is just a fucking egomaniac. You know, he just thinks that he's the best thing since sliced bread.
You think so?
I get that feel from him. Like he's just walking around like, you know, I know what I'm doing. I know I'm the man. You're like, even though I ruined 1, 2, and 3, I'm still the best thing on earth.
I think he's still very jilted by the response to those things, and you know, because it's like the question about, oh, which character would you be? I'd be Jar Jar Binks, you know, that kind of thing. He kind of thumbs his nose to people like, well, screw you, this is my world I created, goddammit.
Yeah. And you know what? Kudos to Filoni for always bringing up George Lucas and letting everyone know, like, because for a time, especially after the prequels and before the new sequels, like there was some hate for George, right?
Absolutely, yeah. People didn't want him involved. They were like, thank God he's not involved anymore. Yep. But then I think as that series went on, and you heard that he was having some advisory role in episode 9, it was like, well, good. Like he's the guy who created the story, so he should be involved in the way that saga is going to wrap up.
And like, sure, there were some mistakes along the way, but like as a whole, I mean, that guy created so much, and Filoni won't let people forget it, and I think that's the right thing to do. And I love how he's always fucking just, you know, tooting George Lucas's horn a little bit.
Well, yeah, like I think Filoni and Favreau, they both talk about it at one point in time. I think Deborah Chow said something as well. Like they're building off of his world, doing this entire series.
Right.
In the 80s, George brought this from the ground up. Mm-hmm. None of these sets existed. None of this, and so they talk about like they're borrowing from the sets for Tatooine. They built IG-88 out of old parts from. He was sitting in the cantina in New Hope.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, let's just grab this dude.
No, he wasn't sitting there. It was part of the, you know, the thing the guy was putting the lenses in.
Oh yeah. He was just just sitting there as like a
IG
machine
later on. Yeah.
He was like
they
sitting there.
Recycle the parts.
Right.
Like
when they show him, by the way, in Empire, the IG-88. Mm-hmm. It's almost comical because it looks like he's just sitting there like, am I supposed to be in the scene?
Yeah, wasn't he like propped up and like what'd they say?
He's
like,
kind of leaning back.
He didn't have legs.
It was a bunch of like scums surrounding just Boba Fett. Like Boba Fett was there, like he's the officer. He's like, it's just a bunch of filler and then Boba Fett because Darth stops and puts his finger in Boba Fett's face, and it's just like, who are all these other scums? Just IG-88 just sitting there. What is this thing?
You know, you brought it up, so let's go into process because that kind of leads the way. Was that Favreau, when he went in there and he said he pitched it, he wanted to make sure, like, even though it was like the Star Wars world, he's like, I really want what George was going for when he created it, was like the Western, the samurai. Right. He wanted that feeling, and I mean, fucking did he capture it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to talk about, if we do process, we need to talk about score with it a little bit, in my opinion, because they talk.
Just merge them? Okay.
Well, just because that Western samurai feel, like, this dude, and I know Matt's been itching to fucking talk about, what is this, Ludwig Göransson? That guy, dude, I'm telling you right now, you could pull him straight out of the Chaz from Seattle. Like, the way he was dressed, the way he was looking, like, dude, he's like, I'm like, who is this cat? Like, this is the dude.
He's a fucking genius. Like, you can, like, the way he talks, it's almost like he's so smart he doesn't know how to put. He's almost like Elon Musk. Like, I get that feeling.
I was super. I was super
like no social graces.
Right,
he just has a tough time articulating.
He doesn't know how to talk to people.
Yeah, maybe. Well, the funny thing was when they first showed him, you're just going, "Oh my god!" They're just showing this guy like fucking around with random instruments in his little studio.
Yeah,
and you're like, "How is this going to work?" Like, you got this vision of when he walked in the room where they all like, "Oh man, I don't know about this."
Well, yeah, he's wearing like a flower power shirt and he's got like striped pants on. I'm like, who is this
long
cat?
Chains,
long
couple
chain,
of
long hair,
rings on.
Like I ordered a bunch of recorders. Could you imagine him telling them that? I got a bunch of recorders coming. They're like, oh dear, how much are we paying this guy?
Now he won an Oscar for Black Panther, right? I think he did.
Was that what it was for? Yeah. He definitely had cred. I mean, he had a long history. It's just when you see him and he's like messing around on a kid's instrument, it's kind of funny.
He's like, what do you say? Locked himself into his studio for 5 months with just instruments, and then he came out with that. He came out with that, like, and takes it on his iPhone on set and plays it for Favreau, and they're like, "Yep, this is the one."
Could you imagine if Favreau was like, "Back to the drawing board, buddy. Not feeling this."
Totally missed it.
Whenever you play a song, oh, you're going to love this song, and you play it and stand there while the person's listening to it and has to react, I always feel like that's a very awkward moment. So when he did it, I felt uncomfortable. Yeah. I was like, well, just send it to them, let them listen to it on their own, because it's going to take a minute. And you look at Bryce
Dallas Howard, and she looks like she's not digging it at all. But then Favreau's like, this guy right here did this. And she's like, this guy. You know, and I'm like, I don't know if everyone's loving it. But, man, because when you first watch the show, right, the music kicks in and you're like not sure what to expect, but it was probably minutes in and I was like, this fucking music is amazing.
It took me longer,
even though it's not Star Wars.
Me too.
Like I had to like let go of that right away. But right when that kicks out, I was like, oh, I fucking loved it. I loved it.
Yeah, it definitely took time to grow on me. At first, I was having a real problem with it. In fact, when you and I were talking about, getting into the episodes a while back, and I just thought I had like notes there. I was like, I'm not sure if I'm into the music yet. And it just took me a while to get there. And because music's so important, I mean, in general, music just evokes emotion no matter what. But in movies, even more so. And in Star Wars, even more so. Like when you think about the goosebumpy moments in Star Wars are almost always fueled for me by music. So when certain themes kick in, the hair on the back of my neck stands up, and that's something that's so important. And so because it's so iconic, all this music from Star Wars, it was cool that they let him go in a completely new direction. And he talked about it because he's like, if I would have had to try to stay within the constraints of what quote unquote Star Wars music is, I would have had a real hard time doing that.
And you're following the master, like you can't.
John Williams.
You can never be a John Williams, but that's the thing. Like it's funny you note that. Like I was watching clips. I was gonna pull some try to do like an intro to the show instead of just using the Mandalorian music. I started putting some stuff together, and I was watching A New Hope, the attack on the Death Star. All right, I was watching that and like listening to that music, and then like the dialogue. Clips of dialogue just take you right back to your childhood. And like, I don't know if it was the 6 beers that I had, but I just started like, oh man, I'm getting welled up. Like I saw like Wedge come through and save Luke, blows through that TIE fighter. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, yes. Like I was just getting screaming. Like, I don't know. And then my kids are looking at me like, what's wrong with you, Dad? And like, you've seen this 1,000 times.
Well, and we've talked about, like, if you look back on the original trailer for A New Hope and there's no music in it, or it's this weird, like, kind of slow building music, it's not the Star Wars theme stuff, it makes that feel so different. That music makes an enormous difference in the way that you watch that film.
Yeah, my mom took us to, they did the remakes when they remade them back in I want to say early editions? 90s or late 2000s, early 90s or late 90s, early 2000s.
Late 90s,
yeah. And she took us into the theater to watch New Hope, and and it starts up, you just like, dude, I almost started crying. Like I never got to see those in the theater.
Oh, really?
And I was like, that's fucking awesome. Yeah. Because it was just, I got to finally like live out my dream of seeing Star Wars.
Well, they've talked about when they made A New Hope, the 2 things that saved that movie was the music and
the edit.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Because the edit, it was pretty rough. It was pretty raw, and they really cleaned it up nicely.
Yep. Yeah, so those are the 2 things. And you know, the guy is like, he's funny to watch though. Like, and the way he plays all the fucking music. He's like, then I went over here and played the bass, and then I went over here and played the piano, and then I put a little drum beat in, and then I did this. And he's like, I found this fucking synthesizer in a garage sale or something.
I'm like, drum.
Right?
How do you know this thing exists, dude?
I think one of the things that helped me too with getting on board with this music was I really loved the way they transitioned from the cold open into the theme of the show. Like that as it goes along gets so much better. That's what really drew me in, and I started fully being like on board with that theme song and those crazy recorders and all those sounds, because you have this like slow kind of, setting the scene for the episode, and then all of a sudden it's like, that music you just played, and then it just kicks you right into to the opening credit. I love it.
Yes. Okay, so if we're staying on sound for a minute, I wrote down a couple of things, because it goes like from instruments, and then he's got the computers. So then he's got that fucking weird wall of like,
that's crazy.
It looks like like he's unplugging like the old like an operator from the 20s with a phone line,
right.
And then he'll plug the cord into somewhere else. He's
the
like,
vast of night,
I don't know.
Right?
Yeah. He's like, I don't know what I'm gonna make. I don't know what sound's gonna come out, but
trial and error.
Yeah, he's like a little fucking kid just making sounds.
Like, how do you keep track of that board? There's probably 2,500 switches on that thing.
Yeah,
like
I'm
looking
if he makes
at
a sound, and he's like, I'm not feeling it. And then 10 minutes later, he's like, you know what? Maybe I do want that sound. How the fuck's he going to find it again?
You take a picture with your phone. Like, okay, I know all the...
Yeah, I don't know what that's like half the time to just like setting my radio in my car. Like, do I fade it to the rear a little bit? I don't know what half this shit does.
I know.
I have no clue.
I can barely play Mary Had a Little Lamb on a piano. This guy's like inventing new sounds on this fucking weird ass wall instrument.
It is impressive.
Probably what Courtney's Rodecaster Pro looks like.
Oh boy.
It was cool for them to go in there, like they put the title on there, January 29th, 2019, right? And they're all sitting in there, they're going to watch the orchestra, and they're going to start playing the music and hear it all come together for the first time. And the thing that really surprised me, I guess, is I've never really thought about like the sequence of when it's built. Like, I know they got to make the music as the movie's being made, but like, how does he build these scores to go into because he just had scripts. He said, and
all he has is just stories. Yeah, he just knows roughly what the script is. He doesn't have visuals.
So yeah,
I mean, he probably has some art that he's looking at.
Moments, or like when the bum 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 when it kicks back in, or like when the when he's flying away from the Ugnaught the first time after they rebuilt the ship, right? And he's lifting off, and the music kicks in. It's like, how does he know for it to be quiet and mellow leading up to it, and then it's
because he's a lot better at his job than we are.
We didn't get hired for a reason.
Well,
or contacted.
I am not that type of person, especially musically. Like, I'm not a musical person. I love music, but I'm not a person that I can barely keep a beat, and I can't play any sort of instrument. Mm-hmm. But to take that, so when you see that final product, but you're like, this guy had this to work with, like some drawings and a script, and like, how do you put yourself in that world and visualize all that? And what we saw was probably not what he was envisioning. You know what I mean?
Oh, sure.
He made the own picture in his own mind and then wrote the music to it. And then I'm always like, how do people even write these? Like, you can put a beat together, and then there's guys that just write lyrics to a rhythm, and then they put music to it. And then there's people that have to have the music and then write their lyrics. And then this dude is making a fucking musical score off of basically what was on paper, and seeing a couple clips, as they were during production.
And he said it was like doing 3 features in one.
Yeah,
for eight episodes.
He said he goes so much music.
Yeah,
it's like Greek to me. Like, I look at that and it's like trying to speak Greek or speak Latin, and I just don't understand how people can do it.
And I speak Latin.
Oh, okay.
I took Latin in high school. No, anyway, I did actually, but I was going to say I think part of it too is that there's stuff on the cutting room floor that we never hear. So he's got to create so many different, tunes and sounds and all these different scores so that they can say, okay, well, this we love, this we love, this we love, this we're not so big on. So I'm sure there's stuff that didn't make it. And then I assume that when you talk about like that scene where he's, launching away from the Ugnaught or whatever, there must be some sort of cleanup parts where it's like, hey, we need a big, emotional moment here. And so he may have to go in there and get on that 2500 switchboard and make some just, alterations to fit.
I've lost my train of thought. There was one more part I wanted to add to
it's a slow train. You'll catch it.
The fact that like he created different music or sounds for different planets, or he had themes for different characters. Like he had the guy.
That's Star Wars though. They always do that.
But I'm just like, it's bad enough.
Yeah, like Leia had a theme, and Luke. Have you ever heard Hamill tell that story about where he was talking to? I think it was George Lucas, or maybe it was. I think it was George Lucas, and he was like, like Han seems to kind of have a theme, and Leia's got a theme, and Darth's got a theme, and like, what's the Luke Skywalker theme? And he's like, the main Star Wars theme is the Luke Skywalker theme, idiot.
You fucking debutante. Quit being so bougie, Mark.
Where's mine at?
I need your own theme.
Exactly. What about mine? It's the main one, dude.
Now, we've geeked out a lot about the volume and some of the making stuff, but I mean, the episode, the process kind of goes into a little bit more of that. Like, I think it's, we don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but it does amaze me how much technology was made for this show, and then how much it even changed and adapted while they were making it. Because like they talk about the motion capture suits for the video games, like that was something they didn't even use until like the 3rd or 4th episode they started doing that. And then he was like, look, we went over here, taped off an area that was the size of what we were going to shoot at, previs the whole thing out, shot it, made cameras in the computer for it, and then went and prevised it, and then shot it live action, did it all in one day. Like, it's fucking amazing.
That episode like tied my brain in knots trying to figure out exactly how they put all that together. I mean, I was just like, I don't even get it, because that previous stuff was kind of cool. It looked like a junky video game, like old school shitty video game. But the way they use that, and then with the motion cap stuff and all those different things and setting up these backgrounds and all that stuff they did, which was amazing to me. They're like, all this is like 2 months of work, and then we go in and shoot it in 3 days. Like, so it's all prep. There's very little post. Right. Because it's all kind of there already. But the fact that they plot out this stuff and have it all in lockstep, I'm sure it made you feel as an actor when you step on that set like, yeah, we got it all. You just need to hit your fucking marks.
That's an interesting thing. You're right. Because an actor likes to bring in their own thing, and they got to have their say and whatever. And you don't really get to have that here because, like Deborah Chow said, like when they were doing the standoff thing, she's like, look, we had like 2 months to previs that whole thing, get it all figured out, 25 extras, all this stuff. And then we only had 6 to 8 days to shoot it. And then they were using so much explosives. What they say? They had like 7,000 rounds. and they were running out, and they weren't going to be able to get more because licensing.
I forgot how awesome that scene was. By the way, that scene is so sweet. The way that's orchestrated, and them like flying in and landing on the ground and all that stuff. That's so awesome. But yeah, there's no room for it. It's not like you're improvising at all. I mean, it's all like stick to the script because we got this thing mapped out down to every second. It's amazing.
Yeah, there's no room. There's no room whatsoever. No alterations. You can't just try out a new line because it's not going to work. It's not
right.
Gonna, it's not going to work.
It's got to fit in seamlessly with what they've already built as the animation. You know, the full animation. Which some of those shots they show, and I'm like, this is better than watching like Clone Wars or Rebels. Like some of that fucking computerized animation was really fucking good.
Yeah, it was really good. But it's just it goes back to what we talked about. I think maybe the first episode was the directorial episode of this series. How collaborative the effort was. How they were all together and all a part of the entire process. So, I mean, it's the complete opposite, of course, of what we talked about with the sequel trilogy, where it was just like handed off in kind of a real rough, awkward manner, and with no real direction toward the end. Having this all mapped out and you know, kind of working off each other and different directors bringing ideas and Favreau taking that in and going, okay, that's great. Now we're going to move in this direction a little bit. It's so well done. It makes me think, can they reproduce that in season 2? Because it was probably difficult to do that.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, she even talks about it. I think Bryce Dallas Howard talked about how he created like it was never done, but it's never been done before. The workflow that he created from the previs to the like everything, the way that they got so much time to prep before they even went into shooting, and they were like it was like camp. Like you see them all having fun, and there's I don't remember what episode, one of the earlier ones, but you see like different directors on the sets of the other directors while they're shooting, so they're all like sort of hanging out, playing around with things. Like they usually a director comes in for a TV show. They're there for the week, 2 weeks, whatever. They shoot it and they move on to something else. Where they must have been months together, working on some of this stuff. And you're right. I mean, it completely shows how seamless it was. You had Favreau in charge, top of the pyramid, and then everyone else has their jobs. But because they can go to him and answer to each other, they can talk to each other, and everything just worked out so fucking good.
Yeah, it was like a parts of a whole type of a thing. You know what I mean? It was almost like a collaborative effort. Everyone, no ego, no,
Right. None of them brought that.
No one cared. Like if he threw out an idea and you didn't like it, they were just okay, I got another one. Here's what I think this scene should look like, or here's what I think we should do here,
Right. And the fact that, like you said, they're all on the set the whole time. Could you imagine as a director them saying, okay, you're going to direct episode 1 and 7, but we want you there the entire time? I think you might be like, wait a minute. Maybe that speaks to the budget. They're getting paid so well. They're like, yeah, that's cool.
Well, I think something else that probably wouldn't have been so enticing as it is the name Star Wars. Like, what director's not going to sign on to this? And I mean, with all this new technology and seeing everything, I mean, they kind of had to be there long enough to play around with it, right? Get comfortable with it, how it was going to work. But I loved, I don't know how to say his last name, but Rick
Famuyiwa?
Yeah, yep, what he said.
Close enough.
Where he says, this is what happens when you get a little bit of money. He said, because he's an indie director. So he's like, oh, this is what happens.
Yeah, he's so used to just having such a different setup, but to have all that prep and all that money and all those resources, it had to just be like, kid in a candy store.
Yeah, what did Kathy Kennedy say? They're like, oh,
rich parents.
We're the high school AV club with, and then Kathy Kennedy's like, yeah, with a really rich parents, mom and dad.
I wanted to just get in that just to get your feel, because I feel like there's people who like Kathleen Kennedy and there's people who don't. I think she's fucking. She's proven her knowledge and like wealth in the film industry, but there was one shot where she started talking or said something, and Favreau looked at her like, "Shut up." Like I got this like feeling he was annoyed by her, and I was just like, "Oh, it can't be true, because how are you going to spend that much time?"
I'll tell you what I get the feel from Kathleen Kennedy. I feel like she would cut your throat in your sleep if it would make her get her to her production. Like it would. She seems like a very, very like she looked really nice and just sitting there quiet and didn't say a whole lot. But then in the end of the day, like if she wants somebody fucking killed, they're gonna be killed, or she's gonna have her way. Well, be damned with everyone. She's proven it.
Like, look how many directors she's fired.
Yeah.
Like while they're ready to make the movie. Oh, shit, the solo directors, they were over halfway through making the movie, and she's like gone.
My testosterone levels just dropped looking at her because I'm just intimidated. Like this woman's gonna do whatever she wants with me, and that's fine by me.
Yeah, she looks pretty ruthless. I think I mean, and I'm sure you have to be in that role to get that shit done, especially when I'm sure there's a tremendous amount of pressure on her. overseeing that whole thing because it's a huge property. They're wanting to make all this money. I can only imagine how she felt when, Solo didn't, underperformed if she was, taking the brunt of that. But you can just see, like you said, the energy around that table. They're all kind of goofing around and she's just sitting there and they're all kind of like, don't say anything wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, imagine what it'd be like to work for her. Like they're talking about Favreau. They're talking about when they shot the shot with they put the directors in the X-Wing pilot.
Yes. I love how excited he was. Like that was not going to happen.
That's the deep cuts part of it. But that X-Wing fighter that they used, they hijacked from the premiere they're like, hold on.
No, it was supposed
to go to
Florida. It was going to be part of Galaxy's Edge.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a part of Galaxy's Edge. Well, they hijacked it so they could shoot. And Kathleen Kennedy had to be like, yeah, hold up. We're going to not send this out. These guys need it for a week.
Right.
And she made it happen. You can get working for her probably has you go, hey, we need an X-Wing fighter. She's like, okay, well, let's see what we got. And she's like, okay, we're going to hold this up. We're going to have it here. You guys have your way with it. And you know that there's probably like a manager somewhere like, where the fuck's my X-Wing? I'm trying to get it. I got everything prepped. And Kathleen's like, listen, bitch, we're shooting this. You're going to shut the fuck up and you're going to like it. Go paint a wall somewhere.
Yeah. I'm sure exactly. She's definitely a get it done type person. I'm real curious to see what happens with her as far as if she's going to just be done at some point or what, as far as overseeing that property.
Signed another 3 years. So I think
did she?
She's the head of Lucasfilm through 2022, I believe.
Okay.
I believe. Because there's already rumors, she's going. Well, they were saying that before she re-signed for another 3 years. So, I mean...
Well, if she's got faith in Favloni, then I'm happy with that because those two are the key for me. So, it seems like she does. So, that's important to me.
And their relationship is they're like fucking almost like they're their brain, like a hive mind. The two of them like finish each other's sentences, and they're really good at like giving each other credit for things. And like it just seems like it was the easiest thing for them to do was to go in there and like Favreau's just like, we got to play with all our Star Wars toys, so let's go into the deep cuts. Yeah, this is where it's like even where he's like, we did this, this, and this, and then he's like, well, where'd this come from? And fucking Filoni can answer like everything.
The thing that I loved about that last episode, the deep cut stuff. What was it called? Collection. What is the name of it?
Connections. Yeah.
The Wilro Hood thing.
Yes.
I had no fucking idea that this thing even existed.
I didn't either.
And this is a big fanfare thing at all the Comic-Cons.
Fucking ice cream maker.
The ice cream maker. So fucking genius by Favreau and Filoni to put that in there as like the best was it was
the best car
carrier in the show.
Yep.
They make one. And they couldn't get an ice cream maker because they said all these fucking nerds from Comic-Cons keep buying them up. So they had to make one.
I was going to say, for those who don't know, so it's a throwaway scene. It's the scene from Cloud City in Empire where Lando has given the order to evacuate the city. And this guy, what's his name? Wilro Hood?
Yes.
He runs by with literally like an ice cream maker in his arms.
Right? Yeah.
And it became this weird little thing that fans, glommed onto and were like, this is our guy.
How does that happen?
It has to be the internet, right?
Well, now he's got an action figure.
That's
There's
crazy.
a Wilro Hood action figure. And now at the Comic-Cons, they do the running of the hood. So like they all line up and they got their ice cream makers and then they run to the stage and all get up and they have their moment to shine. We're like, you're like the worst of the worst.
It has to be the most minutia trivia thing that I've ever seen in Star Wars.
And they made it into a big thing. Like
I don't even think he's on screen a full second. I mean, it is so fast. They had to pause it and he's like blurred.
He's like running like a linebacker or something,
Yeah.
Just got this thing under his fucking arm and he's running and it's an ice cream machine. So they take, and it's those little things that Favreau appreciates. And that's what he kept saying. It's like, I love the line where he's like, what does he say? He looks at Filoni. He's like, what do you always say? It's like our older brother got all the cool Star Wars toys, and we're stuck with all like the D-list whatever, and we had to make use out of it. And I like the Boba Fett. I like the pressure. I like the pressure that makes, because it really goes back to like George making the first Star Wars, right? Like the very low budget, no one believed in him. He had to try to make things work, and they're doing the same thing. Like there's several times where Favreau talks about like staying within a budget and shooting and trying to make things, and the fact that like when they took IG-88, right, they remade him from parts from the cantina. That's the same thing that they're doing in TV. They're taking things that have already pre-existed and bringing them back to use them some other way. It's just it's fucking all around genius.
Yeah, it's these characters in the shadows that, I mean, the thing I think back to, they showed at one point the clip of the Darth Vader head with the action figures inside, because I had one of those. Do you remember that?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And they all had their own little spots and stuff. And the one character I always think about when I think about original Star Wars: A New Hope is that Hammerhead guy, because he's in 1 second of a scene in a cantina, and he became this huge action figure. When I was growing up, everybody had that character. I don't know why. I don't know if he was just readily available, but he had no role in the movie whatsoever. And so they're taking characters like that and pulling them out of these small scenes that are so ingrained in our heads from watching this stuff growing up and in our childhood. And then they give them a more prominent role. And it's such a great way to tie that feeling of Star Wars back into the viewer.
Yeah. It's such a monumental task for them too. And it's such a tough position to be in. But also when you're really, really good at what you do, like Filoni and Favreau and Deborah Chow and all these directors, you really, and there's so much thirst for more Star Wars universe and backstory, or where did this character come from?
Right.
And there's so much to explore. And when you're really, really, really good at the top of your game, like these guys are, you get something like what we have, The Mandalorian, and it's just so fucking amazing.
And it makes you appreciate it more that they were allowed to like do these making of, right? So they get to sit there and talk, and it's like listening to a podcast sort of, but you're like watching it and they're showing you the scenes, like where they show you the Quarren, right? The squid-like head guy,
David Jones, looking good.
That's in the back of the bar, and then they bring him in. He's the one that the Mandalorian
blast doors him.
Cuts him in half, and
all these. He was at Jabba's palace.
That's what. Yes. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so many characters like that. I mean, there was, and then all the little things too, like the hovering injector ball. You know, when he goes in and saves the baby and all that kind of stuff. They just really pulled a lot of different things out of that, because it's a cool way to say, like, well, these characters didn't come from nowhere and they exist in other places. Yes. So of course, they would show up in these other scenes that are somewhat on the similar timeline. The whole Blurgs thing too. I didn't know that came from the Ewok Battle of Endor.
Yeah, I didn't either. Like, and then who was it? Filoni was talking. He's like, every fucking thing I've done has got a blurg in it. Like, he's like, I'm so sick of this blurg. So there's that.
It's like the practicality of them is not even anything because they are ridiculous.
Oh yeah,
but for whatever
they don't
reason,
look very fast. Well, that's the funny thing is at one point the Nick Nolte character that Quill is like, you got to get there by blurg. When they have to go out to find that egg and all that stuff and the Jawas. But the blurgs, I forgot they were actually in Rebels too. I thought they were the flashback I had, and I was wrong. I actually had to look it up to see what the hell this thing was. In A New Hope, especially when they did the remastered version, when they land on the planet and are looking for the droids, there's a stormtrooper riding one of those things. Yes. And I thought it was that, but those are called dewbacks. I thought that was a blurg.
Yeah,
but they're a little bit different. So that was my callback.
Yeah, they're bigger and they've got like longer tails, right? The
4 legs, I think, too. Yeah. So it's a little bit different, but yeah, it's the fact that they take those little details, and I'm sure there's 50 that they didn't include, or will include in the future or whatever, but the fact that they just pick and choose these little bits from, especially it seems like really favoring the original series, which of course for me is perfect.
Such a good homage too, and such a good way to honor what came before you too, and another two that I really picked up on and loved, the Kenner toy for the Stormtrooper transport.
Yep,
that was fucking cool.
That's never been in anything. It's
just a toy that they made. Yeah, and so.
I think that was in Rebels. So he says it wasn't in anything else, but if you watch back on Rebels, I swear there's a transport that's very, very similar to that they're in. But yes, you're right. It hadn't been anything else. It was a toy they made for no reason.
Yes.
And then the other one was the R5D4 with the bad motivator, the red
that was
R5D4.
That's minutia right there, where Filoni walks by.
He's like, give him a spot where his motivator came out.
Yes,
and it looked like he'd been repaired, but you could still see oil and grease stains on the back of his little top of his head.
And this was just a fucking shot that this robot was going to stroll through, no longer than fucking Wilrow Hood. Yeah. But they got to put this detail in.
But that was such a fucking cool callback because everyone remembers that scene. Hey,
he's like, he never left the planet. Like, you fucking, he's got a whole backstory of this fucking robot.
He's been, he just makes it up. Yeah, R5D4 never left the planet. Yeah. He's been sitting there. This R4
got a bad motivator. No one ever fucking did anything with him.
Nobody ever wanted him.
And it's
clearly they fixed him enough.
It's great that they changed it when you walk into the cantina. And no robots allowed, and now robots are running the place.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
They even left that open to interpretation. He's like, maybe the droids own it. I'm like, the droids are like alive and have businesses. Like, I'm just trying to think about. I put myself in that world. I'm like,
what's that loan process look like?
I was like, do they get to vote?
We got to talk about the 500 first.
Yes.
We do have to.
Dude, out of anything that you said, you got teared up. That kind of teared me up. Like, how amazing would that be for you to be called in and like, oh my God, you're like, everything you've ever wanted. Like, you're that big of a fucking geek. You've got your fucking armor, you got all your shit, and you get called, and you're going to be on fucking screen.
Yeah, they're busting them in, and they had no idea what they're going.
Yeah, they didn't know. Yeah, that's the best part. They show up and they're like, "We're what?"
Yeah.
And like, oh my god, they're all like sitting there, and you could tell they were all in their like heyday. And this is that one dude was his first call out. He'd never gone to anything before. He was first, like he was still on OJT in the 501st on the 501st Brigade, whatever he's in.
When I was in Disneyland back in right before the shutdown. There were a number of those folks that were walking around. They all have like T-shirts on, say 501st. They're at the park having fun and stuff. I just mostly threw corn dogs at them and called them nerds. But there were quite a lot of them there. I mean, the amount of people that are in that group. I don't know what the like total size of that grouping is, and there are all these different garrisons and stuff. But it's amazing how many there are, and the level of detail they have in their costumes is just crazy.
I wonder who is the taskmaster for the costumes. Like, you go to submit your costume for like inspection. No, that's a midnight blue on that button. It's supposed to be a taupe. You piece of shit! That cost me $600.
Start over.
Like, there's someone in there. That there's like an imperial inspector.
You think there's like certain people in the 501st that like judge others? Like,
oh, absolutely.
What is that? Is that level 2 PVC? Get the fuck out of here.
But they're more specific. They're like, did you see TK 1267? Screwed that up. I like how the one guy is like, we have this common bond that binds us together, like the Force. And I was like, oh, sir. I just immediately thought, I just saw his like Tinder profile pop up, and it's his helmet on. And this guy's never kissed a girl.
No one's ever sweat.
That was my common bond right immediately. Was, we got this common bond that that binds us together. It's called our virginity.
I like how we're mocking these guys, and we're doing a podcast about Star Wars. Like, we're no better.
They were in the Mandalorian. We're just sitting.
We eat our own.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I did like the fact that all these 501st guys, like Filoni's like, dude, we didn't have to direct them any way, shape, or form. He's like, they all knew how to stand like a stormtrooper. Mm-hmm. They all knew what to act like,
how to
carry their weapon, how to point, how to like. He's like, it's like almost like they've been doing this their whole life. And he kind of winks at the camera. He's like, these guys, they were amazing.
And they get a picture at the end, like after you shoot the scene, there's that fucking picture of all of them with Favreau and Filoni and everybody. They've all got that shit mounted on the wall.
He's like, we're gonna hold on to it. We'll release it to you. Favreau's like, I'm never giving this fuck up. I'm not giving this to these nerds. I'm gonna keep it.
There's 4 guys or gals out there that like didn't take the call.
Yeah,
they're like, oh man, I'm busy that week and I can't do it. Or they had like their daughter's birthday or something, and now they blame their daughter for ruining their chance to be in a Star Wars show.
It's cost
a lot of mental health issues.
They better call me second season, or I'm divorcing you.
The 501st had to set up some grief counseling for like the entire fucking the ones that missed. Where were you on the day that you missed the call out?
I have to say, like, overall in this episode, it was like the level of like geekery and love for Star Wars is beyond my like mental comprehension.
The thing that they ended that episode absolutely perfectly too, because they talked about that scene where they put the directors in the cockpit of the TIE fighters, and they came in out of light speed. They like, this is how deep it goes. Like, Favreau had them mimic that clipped radio traffic that X-wing pilots do. Like, like
you
Red
can't
One.
be impressed. You're really bored with your day.
Or they're just so like they got their own, like, it's cool that like the X-wing pilots got their own little like speak. You know what I mean? Like, we're gonna cut across the axis and draw their fire, and then they go in and they got their own little.
I like how Filoni was completely against.
Didn't want to do it.
Yeah, like he's trying to find a way out. Like, and then Favreau's like, if you get on that flight, you and I
are gonna have problems. Yeah. Well, then he's like, they're in the cockpit, and they each had a little quick line of dialogue. Yeah. They had that little clip speak, and then they go in and they blow up the fucking. Looks like they're launching a gunship. That's the one up ahead, and then they fly in, and then X-wing pilots are so fucking cool. I don't know what it is about them. I really want to be one.
I was going to save this for when we recap that episode, but Filoni, I mean, it's Porkins. It's all Porkins again. Look at him. Porkins. He's got the beard going way down his neck and kind of chubby. It fits so perfectly.
It's Porkins after he had the gastric bypass.
I think that might have been his fear, right? Like, he didn't want to be on camera just because he just doesn't feel like he's pretty enough to be on camera or whatever.
And like I said, I went and watched the run on the Death Star scene, and it's just such a good fucking piece of cinema watching all those guys. And then they're going to die. Like Biggs, Biggs is going to have to bail out, and then, Han's going to come in and save the day. And like, just watching all these guys die, and like Wedge Antilles, I love that character so much. Like, he comes through and he's like the ace Like, I'd like to see Wedge and Poe team up and do like a.
Well, he had one shot in the last movie.
Mm-hmm.
It was a quick line,
Yep.
but I always joke that Wedge kind of like, he got like hit and fucked off. I can't do anything. I'm out of here. Okay, Wedge, later.
Oh yeah, like Luke kind
We
of
got
gives. Looks like, yeah, get out of there, Wedge. You can't do nothing back there. Sorry.
He's like, sure, thanks.
He's like, "Brrr, sorry.
Oh, okay. Let me listen to this new kid who just got
Yeah, everyone
for the
else.
first time.
I'm gonna fly back and hit on your sister.
Yeah, everyone else, every other fucking X-wing pilot, just like sits there and takes their turn in the barrel and gets blown up by Darth Vader. Like 7 of them all die defending the lead pilot. Wedge, I'm losing power back here. I got to bail out. See ya.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not gonna die. Fuck you. Like,
And he's still a hero.
he's still a hero from the fucking. But everyone else stayed there, took their fucking beating. They're all just like wincing, waiting for the explosion to come from behind.
Now,
One more thing I was gonna say, and just to tie that in too, is you're right about that scene and all the pilot, interaction. One of the things that was so cool I thought about Rogue One was the fact that they pulled some of that archival footage of the original A New Hope into Rogue One in that scene. Remember that, where they come in and like it's the same guy who's the gold leader or whatever is talking.
Mm-hmm.
So that, again, when you can tie all that stuff together, it's something that obviously Marvel does really well. When they have this huge plan,
Right.
they tie these little deep callbacks to different things, and that's one of the things that makes Star Wars so good is that you see these things and go, wait, that's the there's a lot
Right.
of those moments.
Now let's. I want to end on the dark saber. I loved seeing with the way they made it and the way they decided to have it look like live on screen, and then Favreau. It was the first time out of all of it, he's like, well, it was kind of more of a personal thing. It was a deep cut for himself. It was a vanity thing more than I think, right? He's like, well, let's tie this into the live action because my character in the Clone Wars had the dark saber. So he kind of ties that all in. But man, that fucking shot. First of all, I love the fact that TIE fighter had never been used in anything. It was just a fucking piece of art that's been sitting around for a few years. So we want to use that. So they built that. They created that for that. That's Moff Gideon, right? Moff Gideon's TIE fighter. And then we cut some out of there. That fucking dark. I am so looking forward to the second season.
Yeah.
How big it's going to be.
Another cool thing with the TIE fighters, before I forget, and it's kind of off topic, but did you notice the catch that they did the folded wings? They folded the wings up when they land. Like you said, that's the first time they showed that ever on camera.
Or the landing gear.
They put first time on the landing gear, and then the wings they pop out and now they fold out so that you can land. Because otherwise, how would you land a TIE fighter? You put rollers on the bottom of it.
Well, yeah, because in the Force Awakens, they just kind of sit on their wings, right?
I'm not sure.
Or they dock them, but there was a couple that were on the ground.
Well, there's a TIE fighter with the vertical wing, and
Yeah.
then there's the TIE fighter that's got almost like a half of a octagon type of a wing, too.
Like Vader's.
Like Vader's, TIE Fighter 2.0.
There you go.
It's the deluxe model. It's the LX. TIE Fighter LX.
LX. The saber is interesting too. I like the way they talked about how they're like, we've only seen it in animated form. So how do you, and that, so you could, it doesn't need to be exactly that when it's on a screen. That's just kind of the animated version of what that looks like. So how do you create it? It looks just the same as the damn animated version. And the fact that when they were showing it in the case and how it looks and how it wasn't really like something they had to clean up, it looked like the damn saber.
Yeah.
I just thought that was so cool. So there were a lot of those moments in this show throughout where things that you just didn't see coming, which I know that you do this all the time, Jay, is you watch a movie or a show and you're already thinking what's coming.
Yes.
Because you're already developing the plot out going, they might do this, they might do this. The Baby Yoda thing, didn't see it coming.
No shit.
The dark saber, didn't see it coming. There's been a lot of those moments in this show where I was just like, oh shit, that was shocking. I didn't know that they were going to go in that direction. It was really cool.
Yeah, you're right. Watching this, I never knew what to be in for because we knew it was going to be different from the start. There's no lightsabers, there's no nothing, and we kind of were led to believe that this is its own corner of the universe. So even at the end, we see the dark saber, fucking blows your hair back because for one, you didn't even expect to see a lightsaber in this series, and then they're like, oh, you're not going to, but here's a dark saber. And you're like, what the fuck? Every episode was just. I love how they talk about how it is. They're all self-contained, but at the same time, it's all part of this big story. They're all their own little movies, but they're progressing the Mandalorian story overall. But oh my god, the show! I'm so excited for season 2.